A Quiet Place is one of the greatest horror movie franchises of all time, or at least I think so. But with the release of the prequel, A Quiet Place Day One, is the franchise destroying itself? Can you have too much of a good thing, or is it even really a good thing at all anymore? Today, we're going to be talking about monsters, movies, and the Quiet Place franchise. I mean, why do we keep coming back? In the current Hollywood landscape, nothing is certain. Films like The Fall Guy and Furiosa, which in an age before would have been smashing blockbuster hits, failed left and right. Rumors of internal struggles from within the industry, job shortages, and potentially even more strikes. It seemed as though we were all doomed to witness the slow and tedious death of the film industry, maybe even the whole entertainment industry as we know it. Which is why when A Quiet Place Day One dropped into theaters last week, I expected nothing. It was a prequel to a sequel, not written or directed by John Kransinski, the original creator, simply produced by him. And so I figured it would be yet another box office flop, another victim of the current Hollywood landscape. But this past weekend, we were all proven wrong. We were given a glimmer of hope in the form of A Quiet Place Day One. Is there not a shorter way to say that? Like A Quiet Place 3, A Quiet Place 0.5, the one without John Kransinski? The point is, it did really well, making $53 million domestically in its opening weekend, which is more than the openings of both the first and second films. Sure, it didn't compete with the powerhouse that is Disney Pixar's Inside Out 2, but who could? So it got me thinking, why? Why is the Quiet Place franchise so successful? One of the most consistently reviewed and financially successful horror franchises of all time, in fact. Well, to get a clearer idea, I think we have to go back to April of 2018, when actor John Kransinski made his writing and directorial debut with a little film called A Quiet Place. Now, this movie took the world by storm. Yes, it was an enjoyable movie, and it had some good scares and characters and creepy monsters, but there was something else. I had friends and family who wouldn't touch horror with a 10-foot pole who had not only watched the film, but loved it. It was a cinematic sensation, and believe it or not, I think that the reason why it was is because at its heart, A Quiet Place is a family film. Sure, there's freaky monsters and cool storytelling and great cinematography, but those are all just tools. What Kransinski and the other creators understood is that at the heart of every great story are great characters. A philosophy they continued to apply to the second installment of the franchise, A Quiet Place 2. But I think this is something that many horror movies forget. As a writer, by building out connections to well-rounded, fleshed-out characters, you raise the stakes of every single moment in action infinitely. Every scare, every tense moment, every heartbreaking death is felt that much more acutely by your audience. See, fiction is all about tricking your audience or your readers into irrationality, setting the story on your own terms and subverting their expectations just enough so that they stop trying to predict the plot and just live in it. And I think A Quiet Place 1 and 2 understand this concept perfectly. Of course, I couldn't talk about A Quiet Place without talking about the monsters, the so-called Death Angels, which whoever came up with that name deserves a raise. See, every horror movie needs its monster, whether that's Dracula or Frankenstein or sometimes even the human condition. And the monsters in A Quiet Place are certainly ones to be remembered. They're alien, in the true sense of the word, foreign, unknown, creatures from the great beyond. I know some people have trashed on the design of the Death Angels, saying that in the second movie with more sunlight and more action, they just look bland and uninteresting, but personally, I love them. Sure, they were painted in a different light in the second movie, less creepy and more aggressive, but I think they had to be. The children had now learned to fight. And so in an effort to keep these Death Angels still a threat, the writers leaned into the visceral animalistic strength of them. You could feel the weight and the speed of these creatures as they ran through the frame, as they attacked people, crashed through buildings, killed characters, and even though I could see them more clearly, it didn't make me any less afraid of them. What's interesting is that while the idea of alien creatures who hunt humans by simply listening to them is a unique and incredibly original idea, the Quiet Place franchise actually harkens back to the roots of the horror genre itself. In the early 1900s, a new subgenre of fiction came onto the scene known as cosmic horror. Defined as a subgenre of horror fiction which focuses on the horror of the unknowable and incomprehensible, often at the expense of gore and other shock elements, I believe that A Quiet Place is a perfect example of modern cosmic horror. The creatures from another world motif, fear of the unknown, terror of the alien. I mean, it's cosmic horror at its finest. And the father of this genre, and really modern horror as we know it, was H.P. Lovecraft. Now, I could and will make a video, if not a series of videos on, Lovecraft, cosmic horror, and all the various controversies surrounding that whole situation. But I just thought it was cool to note that the Quiet Place franchise takes part in the rich history of cosmic horror, maybe even pulling on the subconscious dedication to that subgenre to get audiences interested. The originality of monsters who function only on hearing, the concept of a mostly wordless, silent film is one of the most unique and compelling storytelling aspects of this franchise. I think all great horror finds a way to break the fourth wall, and in doing so, increasing a feeling of fear, threatening its audience more effectively. And the genius thing about the Quiet Place concept is that it does this automatically. It's an interactive movie experience by default, and that interaction is what makes the whole thing so enjoyable. Which brings me now to the recent release of A Quiet Place Day One, a prequel, as well as the announcement of a third movie directed by John Kransinski, and even a video game. I really don't know what to think. I mean, will this franchise simply be ruined by corporate greed, or does it warrant the attention that it's being given? Are there more stories to tell? As is often the case, the truth lies somewhere in between. The Quiet Place franchise is as susceptible to becoming a gimmick as really any other horror franchise. But if they remember their roots, if they remember the themes, the characters, the concepts and ideas that made this franchise so successful in the first place, well, then I'm just gonna have to sit back and watch, because this very well could be one of the greatest horror movie franchises of all time. But as always, this is just the ramblings of a storyteller, so please feel free to, comment down below. Let me know what you think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? I'm always a fan for some passionate and polite conversation. And as always, keep reading, keep writing, and keep talking. Like, in real life, face-to-face, over coffee, hey, even in YouTube comments. Just don't go on, like, Twitter or Instagram. Honestly, if a hacker made the Death Angels but for Twitter, I think the world will be a better place.